Welcome to Washington Policy on the Go. My name is David Bose. I'm the Communications and Marketing Director for Washington Policy Center. This is our program during the legislative session where we come to you every week with our Center directors and examine proposals before the legislature, trends, policy discoveries, and other things that Washington Policy Center is working on. Today, we'll be speaking with two of our Center directors, including Charles Prestrud. He is our Cole Center for Transportation Director and a wealth of knowledge for all things transportation. And we'll also be speaking with Elizabeth Hovde. She is our Center for Worker Rights Director, as well as our Center for Healthcare Director. Today, we'll be speaking with her in her capacity as the Director for the Center for Worker Rights. While we give time for people to join us, I want to remind you that if at any point you have a question during the interview, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen on Zoom. Not in the chat section if you can help it, because it's easier for us to miss the chat, whereas the Q&A box is really simple for us to follow through on. If we miss your question, we'll try and follow up on it after the program. But I do want to remind you, if you feel like your question's not answered, you can always go to washingtonpolicy.org, scroll through our staff, and there's direct emails to all of us there at Washington Policy Center. So if you have a question left over, or even if you think of something a bit later on, after the program and you want it answered, please do that. I want to remind you too that we post these programs on YouTube afterwards. So if you know someone who's interested in state policy, who needs to hear what you heard on this program, we hope that you'll share it via YouTube there with your friends and family members so that we can spread this knowledge out throughout Washington State. And we appreciate, of course, each of you joining us today. All right, and hopefully we'll have the full video. We're in the midst of a kind of a time switch here for the program. Ultimately, we're going to start up at 12:15 through the rest of the session. But I think today is the last 12 o'clock on the nose session. So we'll get right to it. Let's start with Elizabeth Hovde, because I know that Center for Worker Rights Director, she's got just a ton on her plate right now because of some very late night action that took place. Elizabeth, I want to talk to you about this proposal to provide unemployment benefits to striking workers. Where are we at with that? What is the action so far?
Oh, it's so unfortunate. A lawmaker handout to unions basically was passed in the wee hours of the morning today. It now moves to the Senate for consideration, where hopefully it can be stopped. But this Valentine to unions, which is what I'm calling it, it passed largely along party lines in the House. It gives unemployment insurance benefits to striking workers.
I love the analogy. Let me interrupt you there. Sorry, but I love the analogy. It's just that it's like there's a little more to it. It's like if I was giving a Valentine, except I was getting some other guy to pay for it. It's a Valentine to workers where you get all the credit, but you're not actually paying the bill. You're forcing other employers and other workers to pay the bill on something that's unrelated, to this issue. So,
Absolutely.
But I like that. I'm going to steal that from you, Valentine to workers. So go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say the unemployment insurance program in Washington State is socialized, and it's funded by what you're getting to right now. It's funded by taxes on Washington State employers, who, of course, if they're paying these kinds of bills, have less money to pay employees, but that's aside from the issue. The fund is set up to provide financial assistance to employees who lose work through no fault of their own. It is not for people who are choosing not to work, either to make a statement or to try to earn better pay conditions, etc. The UI program is set up to provide for workers who are separated from employment through no fault of their own and who are available to work and who are actively searching for work. This does not describe what striking workers do or are stuck with. So right now, with this social pool of money, you're having workers who are great employers and don't have any of these negotiation hardships going on, or strikers, wannabe strikers who are unhappy with their job, or unions fighting the employer. They're paying into it. So they're going to be paying out more, and their rates could go up. The UI benefit fund could be threatened. It might not be. It doesn't, there is an amendment in the bill that limits their ability to draw and collect from UI benefits for 4 weeks. But regardless of whether or not it will bankrupt the system or not, which it probably won't bankrupt it, it'll probably hurt it in some ways. It will probably encourage longer strikes. It definitely creates.
Well, how could it not? I mean, we've got this situation now where you're having, if this proposal goes through and this principle remains, where instead of being a neutral party, the state says we'll subsidize one side of the bargaining situation. We're not going to subsidize the profits of the employer, but we'll subsidize the paychecks of the people striking, and they've removed themselves from a neutral player to become somebody on the one side. And of course, if you're not feeling the financial sting, why not go on strike? I mean, you can just do it because you're annoyed.
And that's what's forgotten in this. Strikes aren't good for employers and businesses either. They lose product, they lose productivity. There's a financial cost to employers when their employees go on strike. Their reputations are often damaged, for good or for not. This isn't something they enter into lightly, just as we're told employees don't enter into it lightly. And I think if you're going to create a strike fund of sorts for striking workers, you let the unions do that. They collect employees' union dues for something that I think is perfect for this. You set up a strike fund as a union and pay that out to help people survive a strike and be able to strike longer as you want them to do. But you don't penalize all employers in the state and all employees. And
I thought that was a part of the dues. I mean, I belonged to a union when I was early in my radio career, because it was closed shop, and ended up being voted out because they had the world's worst salesperson there who came into the room saying, "Hey, you know what? If you guys don't extend our agreement, we might not even represent you for the next 6 months," or whatever it was. It was like, well, we might not even do anything for you. And I thought, wait a second, we've already paid. We're paying you. In fact, I think we prepaid for this amount of time. Now your attitude is that. So it was, they were not great. Yeah.
During COVID times, when people were losing their job because they weren't vaccinated, which I think was a travesty, unions in many cases weren't going to bat for these employees. The government failed them, their unions failed them in many cases. And this is another example of unions expecting the rest of the state to pick up the impact from decisions like this that are made. It was interesting. The bill has 51 sponsors on it. It's a House bill. It's 1839.
Virtue signaling. Yeah.
1893 is the name of the number of the bill. There's 51 sponsors on there. It is just such a Valentine to unions. I think it's definitely, I'm not sure if it has any, if it has a chance in the House. It has some chance, but I don't know if it'll pass. But what this says to me is, everyone wants their name on it to show that they did something the unions wanted and they want something back. It's just ridiculous. There were 8 amendments proposed that would make this more reasonable, either creating a fund that was fueled by union workers to pay out for this kind of situation, or the unions. There was one that said the state would take it on rather than the employers being penalized in their increased UI, which will probably happen, and that was turned down. This is a favor to unions as I see it, and I would be I think all workers should be offended by this bill. This is going to increase all of our costs.
Yeah, I don't even understand how it's legal. It seems to me to be interfering in the collective bargaining, arrangement between the two. It's just the whole thing strikes me as a very strange proposal. But that said, also our unemployment system, if my memory serves, it's not in the best shape. I mean, we've had some big increases in unemployment costs for employers over the past few years, and adding pressure to it. I guess it fits with a general theme of not being overly concerned about the price consequences and the affordability of the state, for people who think the only way to affordability is to tax tax more and then pass out a little bit to a select group of people. But if my memory serves, the unemployment insurance in the state is quite high and it continues to increase. And I can't see how this isn't going to further that burden on employers.
You know, I heard a lawmaker say just an hour ago when I was listening to the 1 a.m. debate on this thing, that, you know, Washington already ranks 35 in 35th in business climate. This is going to take us way lower. Like, this is not a business friendly state. And COVID times hurt us, right? People were unable to work through no fault of their own. And the UI fund was hurting the unemployment insurance benefit fund. But back then we had the federal dollars helping bail us out of that situation. When a strike hits, that takes weeks and we're paying out if it's a large strike with a large number of employees. There is not a federal government bailing us out of this one. This is going to increase UI rates, I think. And I think it's going to be a detriment to the state as a whole. All workers should be against this, not just workers who aren't unionized.
Yeah, and I'd like to know how this presents any kind of fairness or justice for people by taking the one side. It's like if, you know, it's like the state paying a jury pool, you know, only if you come up with a guilty verdict, you know, we'll give you double. But
Right.
but if it's not guilty, it's a single. Nobody would say, well, that seems fair. It seems like the state's kind of a neutral party here. This is a strange situation. And does now when it goes to the Senate, do they have to hold another hearing? Does it go to committee? Where's it at there? Or do you know offhand?
It hasn't been assigned yet, but I assume it will be assigned to the Labor and Commerce Committee, who will hear it and move on. They did hear a bill. I'm not sure if it was in that committee. Forgive me, I'm lost right now. But Senate Bill 5777 was a companion bill to the House bill. It did not move forward as rapidly as this House one did. So this committee, if they get it again, will hear basically the same thing. So I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure if they will be relieved of it somehow and it will go on to their higher committee that decides if it goes forward. Forgive me for not knowing the process well enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've been up all night trying to keep track of this. If you're anything like me, you get sleep deprived and you start. It's amazing what you can't remember, or you realize you don't know at the time, but you would know in any other circumstance. So you've got
I know, just give
total
me 10
forgiveness.
documents and I can tell you everything. Things
I did morning radio for about 10 years, and believe
Ugh.
me, when I stopped, I was like, wow, the colors are brighter. I can't believe how sharp my brain seems to be, you know. And then I got a bunch of kids and it all went away again. So hey, I know you've got a lot more details, but I also know that you're working on a blog to share those things, and I don't want to take away from that because you know, time's of the essence to get things done, and I know how that is. So I'm going to say I'm very grateful for you coming on and sharing the latest on this issue with us, and I'm going to let you get back to your to crafting that information, and the rest of you can see it later on today at washingtonpolicy.org. So thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Just remember, this is going to cost all of us. This isn't just about helping workers in strike situations. And another thing, you know, the opposition to me on this bill, talk a lot about how families need this. We're talking, they're trying to help low-income workers. And what we're talking about sometimes is people who are part-time workers who live with their parents, baristas, etc. You know, this I think was made in part to respond to the Starbucks labor spats.
Well,
And
again, but that's what your union dues are for. You know, you're setting aside.
yeah,
It's been a historical practice that people have set up strike funds. You know,
yep,
it doesn't necessarily mean you get government to subsidize your side of the issue,
exactly.
because you know, if government wants to take a side, they can change a labor rule about how people work or whatever. They've already changed the minimum wage and negotiated the wage stuff outside. So this seems to me to be, you know, hey, we would like a giveaway. We found another way for you to pay.
Yep.
You know, it's like an election kickback bill where it's like, hey, we've done a great job helping people get elected. Now we'd like some money that we don't deserve. You know,
Yeah.
it's
And small employers are scared, right? Their UI keeps going up, other bills keep going up, their minimum wage keeps going up. This is unfair to them. You know, they talk about this leveling the playing field and making it fair, and it's doing the exact opposite in different areas. Anyway, I'll go and thank you.
Yep. You're welcome. Yeah, I remember, and thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. You don't have to hang out for my rantings, but I remember talking with Mark about this and the unemployment insurance costing a lot of money in Washington State. It costs more and more and more. Comparatively speaking, other states are doing it better, and here we are adding more expense to it, and that strikes me as a frustrating situation. Especially frustrating if you're an employer. And let's say you're doing everything that you believe is right, and next thing you know, you've got government coming in and sticking their thumb on the scale to say, well, we're going to make your labor negotiations more difficult because we're going to take a side here. And regardless of that quote unquote helps, once your side, that strikes me as being unfair when it comes to the when it comes to the position of supposedly being a neutral. Thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate it.